Immediately after the ceremony, the academic procession will exit the hall and make their way to the celebration in the Moat Cafe. Once they've exited the venue, we will then ask the supporters and guests to also exit and join in the celebration. Ladies and gentlemen, could I now ask you all to please stand for the entrance of the student and academic procession.
Good afternoon. My name is Deb Radford and I have the honour of being the Deputy Chancellor of La Trobe University. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we gather today, the Djadja people of the Kulin Nations. I offer my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and offer the same respect to any Indigenous guests joining us here today. I acknowledge the ongoing and significant contribution of Indigenous people to our university and the broader community. Please be seated. Well, it's my great pleasure to be here today and welcome to this very special occasion. I speak on behalf of everyone on the stage when I say that we consider graduations to be the high point in the university calendar. We're celebrating a significant milestone for all of you. What has come before this point has been a period of challenge and success. It's been juggling caring commitments with your academic pursuits, negotiating with research collaborators and supervisors, seemingly endless literature reviews and thesis editing, and tense moments in the face of academic examination. But it's not only been challenges. I hope there have been moments of joy and success, making friends for life, academic or industry recognition for your research, or finding joy in the classroom as a tutor to others. When you look back, you will realise it wasn't all hard, it wasn't all easy, but it was worth it. Today, as you cross the stage, you symbolically move from what was to what will be. As you transition into the next phase of your life, you'll be faced with a litany of obstacles and choices. You'll be part of projects that you love and work with mentors who inspire you. And perhaps you'll have jobs that leave you less satisfied and force you to make difficult decisions. Along the way, there is one certainty. Everything you have learned as part of the La Trobe University academic community will serve you as you move forward in life. You may not have realised it yet, but you are resilient, you are capable, and you are a powerful force for change in the world. So to all of you and your incredibly proud families and friends here today, I offer my heartfelt congratulations. I wish you well today and always as La Trobe University alumni. Graduates, please stand. As Deputy Chancellor of La Trobe University, I certify that the graduates presented here today have fulfilled the conditions prescribed for the award of their degrees and therefore are entitled to those awards. By virtue of the authority vested in me, I'm delighted to present the degrees for which you have qualified. Please be seated. I now would like to call on Professor Chris Pakes, Pro Vice-Chancellor, Graduate and Global Research, to present the graduates.
Thank you, Deputy Chancellor. It gives me great pleasure to present the graduates. Today, we will also be presenting the Nancy Millis Medal. The Nancy Millis Medal is awarded to PhD graduates who have authored outstanding doctoral theses, judged to be in the top 5%. This award is named after Professor Nancy Millis, AC, who served as Chancellor of La Trobe University from 1992 to 2006. Doctor of Philosophy, Manjith Bose, whose thesis is titled Nanofabrication of Superconducting Diamond Devices. Manjith studied superconductivity in diamond. He demonstrated that low-noise superconducting nanoscale devices can be realized on diamond by utilizing advanced nanofabrication technologies. He also developed protocols for in-house growth of high-quality single-crystal diamond films. His work will inform the application of superconducting diamond devices in sensitive magnetometry. I present to you Dr. Bose. Steve Ianni, whose thesis is titled Surface Engineering of Diamond for the Development of Spin Transport Devices. Steve delved into the quantum nature of the surface conductivity of diamond. By engineering the diamond surface, he gleaned unique insights into its transport and quantum behavior, while also developing a novel nanoscale fabrication protocol for these surfaces. Together, these aspects of his work open new avenues towards practical diamond-based quantum devices. I present to you Dr. Ianni. Panchi Akmari, whose thesis is titled Investigating the Influence of the Probe Tip in Scanning Near-Field Optical Microscopy. Panchi studied the probe tip effect in scanning near-field optical microscopy, or SNOM, imaging systems. The study demonstrated a realistic and accurate full-wave simulation model for investigating images observed experimentally. The results provide an insight into methods for image recovery and resolution improvement in SNOM. I present to you Dr. Akmari. Evans Kiptu Cheriot, whose thesis title is Genetic Analysis of Milk Production Traits in Relation to Heat Tolerance in Australian Dairy Cows. Evans studied genetic features controlling heat tolerance in dairy cattle using big data. He made new discoveries that have increased our understanding of the biology of thermal stress in lactating animals that are more sensitive to a warming world. The findings are expected to improve heat tolerance of animals. I present to you Dr. Cheruyot. Richard John McNeill, whose thesis is titled Life at the Periphery, Patterns of Making Do on the Fringes of the Goldfields. Richard reconstructed the dynamics of an early goldfield society from the material record of a historical goldfield. His research and fieldwork reveal a society founded on substance whose diversity, coherence, and resilience demonstrate transformation and adaptation in the face of the uncertain and the remote, and challenge historical and contemporary narratives of civic progress. I present to you Dr. McNeill. Lennon Matchett Oates, whose thesis is titled Production of Novel Medical Cannabis Using Genome Editing Technology. Lennon developed tissue culture and genome editing protocols to improve the genome of cannabis. He furthered the understanding of the important medicinal genes in cannabis while demonstrating that targeting these genes is possible using current technologies. His research provides significant tools to improving the medical potential of cannabis. I present to you Dr. Matchett Oates. Nishamfi Mafiyalagan in absentia. Monagamaj Donna Mihiri Munasinghe, whose thesis is titled Effects of Cocoa Supplement on Aging and Amyloid Beta-Induced Deficits in Alzheimer's Disease Studies with C. eaglans. Monagamaj studied the role of cocoa on aging and related disease conditions. She demonstrated that cocoa supplementation could improve age-associated health and amyloid beta-induced deficits in Alzheimer's disease, especially the short-term memory loss. These findings provide insights into how dietary approaches can be used to promote healthy aging. I present to you Dr. Munasal Singh. Anjali Pranijivan Zavari, whose thesis is titled Investigating the Infection Process of Rhizopus stolonifera and Symptom Development in the Almond Disease Whole Rot. Anjali investigated symptom development in almond whole rot, a fungal disease. She determined how field treatments affect whole composition and fungal acid production. Her DNA analysis revealed that 2 Rhizopus species cause disease in Australia. The findings provide important insights for designing long-term disease controls to support the Australian industry. I present to you Dr. Zaviri.
Claire Allen, whose thesis is entitled Calcium Signalling in Dictyostelium discoideum. Claire studied calcium signalling in dictyostelium, a model organism for understanding human disease. She created and studied strains with genetically altered levels of 2 channels, which let calcium into cells, and 2 pumps, which remove it. Her findings shed light on 2 human diseases, mucolipidosis and polycystic kidney disease. I present to you Dr. Claire Allen.
Ishan Arya, whose thesis is titled Destination Australia, a qualitative case study of the aspirations, experiences, and integration of Indian student migrants in Australia, 2013-2017. Ishan studied the aspirations, experiences, and integration of young Indian student migrants in Australia through qualitative research. He showed that a range of push and pull factors contributed towards the primary goal of permanent migration of the cohort. His research has policy and societal implications for India and Australia. I present to you Dr. Arya.
Sebastian Bass-Stringer, whose thesis is titled New Therapies Targeting the PI3K Pathway for the Failing Heart, Characterising the Role and Safety of Cardiac PI3K, P110 alpha. Sebastian studied the role of a protein called PI3K that is activated during exercise to protect against heart disease. He generated and characterised new PI3K genetic models, PI3K-based therapies and tools. The findings provide new insight into PI3K function with clinical relevance for preventing and treating cardiac disease. I present to you Dr. Bass-Stringer.
Estefania de Los Angeles Boada Viteri, whose thesis is titled Behavioural Partitioning of Mainland and Island Lava Lizard Assemblages in Ecuador. Estefania examined the role that behaviour plays in niche delimitation by Ecuadorian lava lizards. Her research highlights how behaviour is only minimally constrained by shared ancestry, responding more to the ecological and social context. Her research also demonstrates the impact of urbanisation on the Galapagos Islands. Estefania is also the recipient of the Nancy Millis Medal. I present to you Dr. Boada Viteri.
Glenn Michael Bond, whose thesis is titled From Hubris to Humility, Localization and Legitimacy for International Non-Government Organizations. Glenn studied the relationship between localization and legitimacy for international non-government organizations, or INGOs. The data exposed organizational and behavioral norms that constrain change and perpetuate power imbalances within INGO families. The findings have implications for both researchers and practitioners seeking to engage with decolonization and reshape the international development infrastructure. I present to you Dr. Bond.
David Cann, whose thesis is titled Adaptation of Winter Wheat Genotypes to Semi-Arid Southern Australia. David investigated how winter wheat can help Southern Australian farmers adapt to climate change. He discovered that targeting resource partitioning traits and shorter life cycles can increase winter wheat yield. These results will help breeders to provide farmers with high-yielding wheats adapted to the changing Southern Australian climate. I present to you Dr. Cann. Nilu Nasrolahi, whose thesis is titled Immobilisation of Nitrogen Fertiliser in Residue-Retained Mediterranean Semi-Arid Cropping Systems. Nilu studied the efficiency of nitrogen fertiliser applied to dryland crops. She showed that immobilisation of nitrogen by soil microorganisms was the greatest source of inefficiency, and deep placement of nitrogen improved crop recovery. Her findings provide knowledge of management factors to reduce immobilisation and increase crop nitrogen uptake. I present to you Dr. Nasrolahi.
Ankush Chandal, whose thesis is titled Discovery and Methods of Preservation for Seed-Associated Microbes from Glycine max and Native Glycine crop wild relatives. Ankush studied seed-associated microbes from soybean and a native Glycine crop wild relative. The research revealed domestication and seed storage procedures influence the microbiome composition of seed. The research provided microbes for potential use in agriculture and new ways of thinking for seed microbiome conservation. I present to you Dr. Chandal.
Alison Pei San Chong, whose thesis is titled A Switch-in Mechanism Prevents Doxorubicin-Mediated Cardiac Damage. Alison explored strategies to prevent cardiac damage imposed by doxorubicin, a chemotherapy treatment for aggressive breast cancer. She found that combining doxorubicin with formaldehyde-generating prodrugs provides cardioprotection while simultaneously enhancing anti-tumour effects in mice. The findings have the potential to improve the therapeutic window for doxorubicin in the clinic, thus enhancing patient quality of life. I present to you Dr. Cheong.
Sai Varaprasad Chitty, whose thesis is titled Understanding the Role of Extracellular Vesicles in Cancer Cachexia. Sai examined the role of extracellular vesicles in inducing cancer-associated weight loss. During his PhD, he identified a novel candidate that is responsible for weight loss associated with various cancers. His finding could in future lead to new therapeutic development to treat cancer and its associated weight loss. I present to you Dr. Chitty.
Dino Vincent Paul Concepcion, whose thesis is titled Health on Hold, The Hidden Injuries of Call Centre Work. Dino explored call centre workers' experiences of the health effects of their work. His findings contribute to understanding the interrelatedness of emotional labour, neoliberalism, precarious work, and racism. This knowledge has practical implications for policymaking in occupational health and safety standards in the Philippines and in other countries. I present to you Dr. Concepcion.
Krishni Fernando, whose thesis is titled Novel Bioprotectives and Metabolomics of Lolium epichloe symbiota. Krishni studied grass-associated fungal endophytes, fungi that live within grass symbiotically without causing harm. She discovered endophyte strains that can protect the plant against common pasture and turf diseases via metabolite production. Novel endophytes with enhanced bioprotective properties are now identifiable without the use of expensive field trials. I present to you Dr. Fernando.
Donovan Garcia Cerron, whose thesis is titled Role of Extracellular Vesicles from Fusarium graminearum and Fusarium oxysporum in Fungal Plant Interactions. Donovan investigated the extracellular vesicles released by fungi that are serious plant pathogens. These vesicles are in the nanometer scale and carry molecules that are essential for the infection. He provided the description and potential function of the vesicles derived from pathogens that infect wheat and cotton. The findings provide alternatives to create new antifungal treatments. I present to you Dr. Garcia Cerron.
Will Gardner, whose thesis is titled Unsupervised Machine Learning for the Analysis of 2D and 3D Time-of-Flight Secondary Ion Mass Spectrometry Images. Will studied and developed artificial intelligence algorithms for analysing 2D and 3D molecular imaging data from advanced surface science instruments. The algorithms have revealed important and previously obscured relationships in large and complex data sets, with far-reaching implications in the fields ranging from cancer research to novel materials development. Will is also the recipient of the Nancy Millis Medal. I present to you Dr. Gardner.
Yongfeng Ge, whose thesis is titled Evolutionary Algorithms for Enhancing Outsourced Distributed Data Privacy and Utility. Yongfeng explored the trade-off between privacy preservation and utility maintenance in outsourced data storage. Accordingly, he embedded evolutionary algorithms into the design of distributed database systems to achieve effective optimization. His findings reveal a promising direction to protect data privacy and promote data utilization for each individual and enterprise. I present to you Dr. Ge.
Shannon Genders, whose thesis is titled Characterisation of Alcohol-Seeking Behaviours in Gallin Receptor 3 Knockout Mice. Shannon used animal models of alcohol-seeking behaviour to determine that genetic deletion of the gallin receptor 3 increases alcohol intake in mice. She found changes in key brain regions involved in addiction, which contribute insight into the function that the ghrelin receptor 3 may play in alcohol use disorders. Shannon is also the recipient of the Nancy Millis Medal. I present to you Dr. Genders.
Sarah Houseman, whose thesis titled Emerging Ecologies of Organisation, Renewing Governance in the Anthropocene. Sarah explored the governance practice of 4 non-hierarchically structured organisations. She revealed governance guided by principles of equality and inclusion, which cultivates ecological reflexivity and engenders mutuality. The findings contribute to theorising collectivist democratic organisations, giving insight to practices that foster participants' potential of working cooperatively towards human and planetary well-being. I present to you Dr. Houseman.
José Luis Alfredo Huaman Torres, whose thesis is entitled Wild Deer as a Source of Viral and Parasitic Infections in Australia. José studied the distribution of viral and parasitic infections in Australian deer. His findings demonstrate that deer are not a current source of livestock diseases. However, this scenario may change in the future due to the growing deer population. His research provides important vital baseline data to gain a more comprehensive view of the dynamics of infectious diseases in Australian deer. I present to you Dr. Huaman Torres.
Ella Johnson, whose thesis is titled Immunodetection and Functions of Bacterial Membrane Vesicles. Ella examined how bacterial nanoparticles help bacteria spread infection, inflammation, and spread antibiotic resistance. The research developed novel methods to characterise an immune protein that detects nanoparticles and identified how nanoparticles spread antibiotic resistance. The findings advance our knowledge of how bacteria mediate inflammatory disease and spread antibiotic resistance. I present to you Dr. Johnston.
Fleur King, whose thesis is titled The Archaeology of Sisters Creek Cave, Coastal Subsistence and Land Use in Holocene, Tasmania. Fleur used archaeological evidence to investigate diet and foraging strategies in northwest Tasmania over the past 7,000 years. Her research established a link between the flexible coastal economies of the Tasmanians and changes in marine paleoenvironments. It also resolved long-standing debates about the role of fish in the diet of Tasmanian Aboriginal people. I present to you Dr. King.
Hugh Marman, whose thesis is titled Understanding and Characterising the Effects of Radiation Damage in protein microcrystallography. Hugh investigated the effects of X-ray radiation damage in protein microcrystallography. His research has led to the development of new protocols for imaging the molecular structure of proteins, a critical step in rational drug design and the maintenance of a healthy society. I present to you Dr. Marmon.
Timothy McIntosh, whose thesis is titled Intercepting Ransomware Attack with Stage Event-Driven Access Control. Timothy investigated the current landscape of ransomware research and found that many studies did not adequately understand ransomware attack mechanisms. He proposed to intercept ransomware attacks with stage event-driven access control, incorporating both program-centric and user-centric measures. His research helped to better secure operating system and user files. I present to you Dr. McIntosh.
Joseph Menaza, whose thesis is titled Investigating the Immunological Response to Secondary Infection During Sepsis in Tremel 4 Knockouts Mice. Joseph studied immune suppression during sepsis. He identified a novel mechanism where the immune system develops memory during sepsis to better combat future infections and human genes involved in this process. These findings provide potential targets to treat sepsis, which currently has no therapies. I present to you Dr. Menaza.
Caitlin Mrocek, whose thesis is titled A Dictyostelium Model for Tauopathies. Caitlin utilised a model organism to investigate the roles of two key proteins implicated in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. She found that the two proteins interact and that this has functional consequences. These findings provide insight into the complex relationship of neurodegenerative proteins and may inform treatments in the future. I present to you Dr. Borocek.
Adia Nakpal, whose thesis is titled Investigating Efficacy and Mechanism of Resistance to Tyrosine Kinase Inhibitors in HER2-positive breast cancer brain metastasis. Adia investigated the efficacy of a small molecule inhibitor that are used to treat patients with HER2-positive breast cancer. Her research reveals novel mechanisms of action for these inhibitors and provides new insight into molecules that govern treatment resistance. These findings identify new strategies to treat advanced HER2-positive breast cancer. I present to you Dr. Nakpal.
Dangadara Egadaga Ravindi Sashitra Nanayakara, whose thesis is titled Stochastic Modelling and Statistical Analysis of Spatial and Long-Range Dependent Data. Ravindi studied stochastic modelling and statistical analysis of spatial and strongly dependent data. She developed the theory and statistical methodology for investigating spherical random fields. The research findings were applied to analyse cosmic microwave background radiation data. She also advanced the statistical inference procedure for strongly dependent random processes. Ravindi is also the recipient of the Nancy Millis Medal. I present to you Dr. Nanayakara.
Amir Mohammed Nasiri Kanari, whose thesis is titled Defining Extracellular Vesicle Mimetic Nanovesicles, Their Protein and RNA Composition and Therapeutic Potential. Amir Mohammed investigated the formulation of a nanodrug delivery system with an RNA biomolecule. His research revealed the molecular composition of cell-derived nanovesicles and identified a potent therapeutic mRNA. These findings provide insights into the development of novel biological therapies for the treatment of Alzheimer's disease. I present to you Dr. Nasiri Kanari.
James O'Dwyer, whose thesis is titled Using Genetics to Aid Management in the Promotion of Connectivity, Recruitment and Genetic Diversity for Australian Fish Species. James studied the population genetics of several key Australian native fish species. He developed novel applications of conservation genetics to characterise the population connectivity, mating systems, and the future resilience of each species. The findings contribute to identifying best practice management of native fish, promoting species longevity in a changing world. I present to you Dr. O'Dwyer.
Kia ora koutou. Michelle O'Toole, whose thesis is titled He Taonga Te Reo, Non-Māori Engagement with the Māori Language in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Michelle explored cross-cultural relations in Aotearoa, New Zealand, drawing on ethnographic fieldwork conducted at a Māori tertiary education provider. This research examined non-Māori engagement with Te Reo Māori. The work contributes to scholarly discussions about social change, decolonisation, non-Indigenous participations with Indigenous language, cross-cultural relationships, and cross-cultural awareness. I present to you Dr. O'Toole.
Alessandra Ottonello, whose thesis is titled Multi-drug-resistant bacteria with novel analogues of vancomycin. Alessandra studied vancomycin, a drug of last resort in the treatment of many infections. The rise of resistant bacteria is now alarming the medical community. She explored the synthesis of new analogues of vancomycin. The findings resulted in the discovery of novel potential antibiotics with activity against multi-drug-resistant bacteria. I present to you Dr. Ottonello.
Douglas Pretzel, whose thesis is titled The Age of the Earning, Queer Identities and Advocacy in Germany, 1864 to 1897. Douglas studied the German men who called themselves Urnings. Urnings were followers of Karl Heinrich Ulrichs and formed a networked and assertive queer community between 1864 and 1897. His research has uncovered evidence of early sexual and gender-diverse identity formation that has implications for contemporary queer understandings. Douglas is also the recipient of the Nancy Millis Medal. I present to you Dr. Pretzel.
Priya Ramkissoon, whose thesis is titled Electrochemiluminescent Iridium and Organic Lanthanide Energy Transfer Assemblies. Priya designed and prepared a range of new light-emitting molecules that incorporate elements known as lanthanides. She showed how energy from light or electricity could be used to generate lanthanide luminescence from these molecules via energy transfer pathways. This finding allows for the development of novel biomedical imaging probes. I present to you Dr. Ramkissoon.
Magdalena Shepelevich, whose thesis is titled Gentrification, Placemaking and Inner City Culture in Brunswick, Melbourne, From Industrial Hub to Hipster Capital. Magda explored the role of culture in gentrification in Brunswick, Melbourne. She identified different forms of placemaking in the suburb's transition from working-class industrial hub to the hipster capital of Melbourne. The findings present insights into local cultural practices of making community that have implications for urban studies and policymakers. I present to you Dr. Shepelevich.
Zhao Yin, whose thesis is titled Vulnerability, Exploitability Prediction, and Risk Evaluation. Zhao explored new ways to quantify the risk for software vulnerabilities, leveraging advanced artificial intelligence techniques. The research devised the novel deep learning approach for data-driven vulnerability, exploitability prediction, and analysis. The research results have profound impacts on vulnerability management and a range of cybersecurity applications. I present to you Dr. Yin.
Deputy Chancellor, that concludes the presentation of graduates. I would now like to invite Dr. Glenn Bond to speak on behalf of today's graduates.
Thank you kindly. To begin with, I would like to acknowledge country and recognise the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. Firstly, to acknowledge the dignitaries here on stage with me, Deb Bradford, the Deputy Chancellor, Professor Susan Dodds, Senior Deputy Vice-Chancellor and Vice President, Research and Industry Engagement, Professor Chris Pakes, Pro Vice-Chancellor, Graduate and Global Research, And finally, Professor Nick Bisley, Dean of my school, the School of Humanities and Social Sciences. Also a hello and an acknowledgement to this extraordinary group of graduates. That takes some listening, doesn't it? And to their family and friends who have made the trip in today. Thanks also to the lovely people of La Trobe Student Services for the privilege and responsibility of delivering the student address today. So it's been a standing joke in my family and amongst my friends over recent years that my main reason for doing a PhD, that my primary motivation has been to be ready for the day that an airline pilot comes over the PA system and says, if there's a doctor on board that's willing and able to assist, please make yourself known to cabin staff. And at this point, so the joke goes, I leap to my feet and I explain that I have a deep and nuanced understanding of the use and abuse of power in international development cooperation, and how can I be of help? It's been a pretty comfortable way over the journey of dodging the difficult questions of what are you studying, what's your PhD on, why are you doing a PhD? They're questions very easily asked and very, very difficult, as I suspect everybody here knows, to answer. So it's been quite handy, particularly I live with my family in New Zealand, and in New Zealand it's the land of the long white cloud, but it's also the land of the short, sharp understatement. So if you can just tone down your response to most questions, you'll fit right in my experience. So it's important not to appear too boastful or too long-winded in describing what you do with your time. So a 2-sentence gag hits the mark. The reason I'm bringing this up today is that my family and I flew over for this event late last week, quite literally flying in to graduate with my doctorate, and the captain came over the loudspeaker and said, if there's a doctor on board who's willing and able to help, please make yourself known to cabin staff. So it turns out, leaping to your feet and exclaiming, I have a deep and nuanced understanding of the abuse of power in international development cooperation, how can I help, is actually not funny in a medical emergency. It's not funny at all, and I would just like to apologise to all of the people involved, and if I could also, on behalf of Qantas Airways and the Australian Government, actively discourage fellow doctorates from misusing your titles in this manner. In thinking about today's address, I cast my mind back to 2017 when I was chewing over an idea, a loose proposal, if you like, around a PhD. I had an idea but not yet a home for the PhD. I was convinced that the idea had merit, but I needed help to develop and stage and shape that work. In my case, the decision to land on La Trobe was very closely related to the opportunity to work with Professor Chris Roche, and who was to become my supervisor, and to position my research within the niche and the very innovative portfolio of work done by the Institute for Human Security and Social Change here at La Trobe. So it's essentially a very sensible and pragmatic decision. What I didn't fully appreciate at the time was the deeper pride and attachment I would grow to have at La Trobe. So I embrace the university's history of presenting an accessible alternative for higher education alternative to the young people of suburban Melbourne. I really genuinely admire and respect the focus on connection with and support to local communities. And I also deeply connect with the university's lived values of inclusiveness and diversity and equity and social justice. They're things that strike a chord with me. Alongside those values, we've all had the honour of studying at a university that continues to surge up university world rankings and not so much punch well above its weight, but fundamentally shift its weight class. Great results in a range of technical areas and spectacular results in the context of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals had consistently confirmed for me that I'd made the right choice. Even more so that La Trobe continues to place in the top 10 among the world's universities for contributions to gender equality, including number 1 in the world in 2020 when I was knee-deep in my PhD. This should be a source of enormous pride for us all, and whatever our discipline. It's both a privilege and an honour to have studied at La Trobe and to have contributed in some small way to our international standing. It isn't all beer and skittles though, and I feel the need to mention that we've all had to put up with quite a lot of brown brick buildings over the course of the last few years. Lots and lots of an awful lot of brown brick buildings, milky sort of baby poo brown brick buildings. There may come a time when that sort of late 60s, early 70s architecture has the same appeal as Victorian and Deco and mid-century design, but I'm not sure we're there yet. You can't have everything. Thinking about the challenges we've faced, I decided not to linger on the specific challenge of doing a COVID-19 PhD. I think we all know that, and I think it's suffice to say that everyone graduating today probably lists adaptability as a key strength on their CV. The only other thing I want to say about the pandemic is that it's just to say good on you for all being here in the room with actual humans, not hiding behind the safety and security of a computer screen and a dodgy internet connection. And I'm sorry you can't put me on mute. So instead of the challenges of a PhD under COVID, I thought I would linger for a moment on the challenge of undertaking a PhD at any time. Among the many things I've learned through this process is that the average length of necessary for a PhD correlates quite closely with the average length of time required for at least one significant non-PhD life event to occur. Life goes on, and big non-PhD stuff is just going to happen. It's so obvious, but so rarely planned for, and some people move away and other people move closer. Some relationships begin and other relationships end. Some lives begin and other lives end. For me, the biggest single event was the loss of my mum in 2020. For a colleague at the Institute here at La Trobe, it was the birth of her first child. These are significant, big things, positive or negative, sad or happy, that happen over the course of that sort of stretch of time. Through the fantastic accelerated completion program here at La Trobe, I heard a range of other similar stories of a similar magnitude, big things that had been part of life, part of the PhD journey. So for everyone here, I suspect there was at least one or possibly several big things that happened at some point in the 4 or so years it took you to get to the end of the PhD. So I guess I just wanted to pause to acknowledge the importance of that. The PhD mission is a long and cloudy personal journey. It's often littered with patches of self-doubt and a deep, well, for me certainly, a deep weariness. And when life outside the PhD gets big, it serves to magnify the mental load to near bursting. So I thought I'd like to acknowledge those life events, be they positive or negative, and more importantly, celebrate the fact that we all got there in the end, one way or another. I get to extend my personal thanks. It's meant to echo the thanks of everybody to my academic team. So firstly, for me, it was my primary supervisor, Professor Chris Rocha, an extraordinary individual I'm honoured to have worked with. My co-supervisor, Dirk Thomser, Associate Professor Dirk Thomser, who spoke to my thesis earlier, and Dr. John Cox early in the piece. I really felt supported and enabled by these relationships, and like many accepting degrees in this group today, I suspect I simply could not have done this without their counsel, so great thanks. More personally, I would like to extend my thanks to my family, my extended family here in Australia, but particularly to my own little tribe in New Zealand. Just as it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a household to raise a PhD. So my love and enduring gratitude to Claire, Max and Sadie, who are in the audience today, for getting me through this. I'm certain and I hope that everyone else up here today owes similar debts to those nearest and dearest, so on our shared behalf. Finally, and perhaps most simply, I extend my congratulations to this extraordinary group in front of me here. Whatever your discipline, you've worked hard, you have overcome obstacles, you have made sacrifices, and you have made a meaningful contribution. Today is a day to take stock and allow yourself some pride in your accomplishment. If my mother was here when we walked out of this room, she'd be the first in the queue, offering me a big hug and her congratulations. And then I suspect a few moments later, when the dust had settled and the crowd had dispersed, she would be back at my side, squeezing my arm gently, looking me in the eyes and telling me that she could not be prouder of me. So that's where I'd like to leave us today, with that gentle squeeze on everyone's arm and the knowledge that we can all see what you've achieved. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. My name is Professor Sue Dodds, and I have the honour of being the Senior Deputy Vice Chancellor and Vice President, Research and Industry Engagement of La Trobe University. I'd like to begin by thanking Glenn, Dr. Bond, for giving us such an uplifting personal address. He's done most of the work I need to do, so that should make my job a bit easier. He's reminded us of the value of understatement. I'm not misusing your title. I've got such a long one, I'll get doomed. The importance of the impact and the values that drive your research, being able to recognise that in yourselves and in your colleagues. And the importance of recognising that a PhD is a very important, big project in your life, but it doesn't stop life happening at the same time, that they run in parallel. And so recognising the personal journey, the loss, the joy that goes alongside a PhD program. And recognition for the fantastic people who've made it possible for you to get here today. I'd like to acknowledge our many supervisors who are here as well. So please put your hands together one more time to thank Dr. Glenn Bond for his address. My task, twofold, is to provide today's closing address. I need to energize the room, I think that's already been done before I got here, and to leave you all feeling inspired to change the world. No pressure here. In an effort to do that, I'm going to talk to you about the very real idea of impact that drives so much of the work that's done in our university's mission. For every person on this stage, we've devoted our careers to having a positive impact for our students, for our disciplines, and for the community. That's why we teach. It's why so many people are here who supervise research students. It's why we join industry advisory groups, why we try to work with organizations and government. It's why we spend hours working in our labs or traveling for field research, because we want our work to have real impact. We want our students and their families and the communities we serve to feel the positive impact of our work. As each of you crossed the stage today, we also celebrated the impact of your research in your chosen fields. As your citation was read, and they were amazing, we understood not just what you've been studying, but the impact that your research has had on your discipline area and has potential for in the wider world. And the source of incredible pride for our institution that you've already begun to make such a big difference. But if you're looking for more inspiration, there's a few examples we can offer of how La Trobe researchers are making a difference, and here are just a small number. In August, two of our researchers, physicist Professor Brian Abbey and Dr. Eugenio Ballar, and their collaborators at the Peter MacCallum Cancer Centre and the Garvan Institute of Medical Research, won the Australian Museum's Eureka Prize for innovative use of technology for the Nano-M slide, which they developed to modify the surface of conventional microscope slides at the nanoscale to allow for much earlier, accurate diagnosis of diseases such as cancer. We've also just established two new research institutes to address two of the most pressing issues facing Australia and the world, and you've heard a number of the research projects that have come out in these areas. The Care Economy Research Institute will conduct research that will improve the well-being of those in care, support the development of appropriate technologies for care, and anticipate workforce needs across age, disability, and out-of-home care. And the La Trobe Institute for Sustainable Agriculture and Food, which will deliver solutions for sustainable and nutritious food production to a growing world population in our increasingly resource and climate-constrained world. In the field of archaeology, Professor Susan Lawrence has revealed the vast environmental damage caused by the Victorian gold rush. River systems, including the Murray, were clogged by mining runoff and their natural flow disrupted. Professor Lawrence has been able to use this historical knowledge to advise on sustainable development, water management, and recovery projects such as revegetation. Continuing along the ecological theme, Professor Andrew Bennett and Emeritus Professor Michael Clark have developed a method for the Department of Environment to monitor biodiversity in areas affected by bushfires. It's now possible to consider ecological well-being when planning fire management, taking into account the need to protect habitats as well as minimize the risk of bushfires. Now, of course, there are payoffs to pursuing the real impact in your career. And that's much more valuable than the money you may earn. It's the feeling of satisfaction that your effort was worth it. There's something to show for it. If you look around the hall right now, you'll see that feeling reflected in the faces of everyone here. So to our graduands, as you move forward in your professional lives, I hope you keep pursuing that feeling you get from striving to make an impact. I hope you maintain contact with your colleagues and the university. And we hope that that sense of impact motivates you to push through in moments of challenge or discomfort, or when life happens along the way. To the supporters, supervisors, family, and friends who've joined us here today, I want to offer my gratitude. Thank you for your investment in our graduates over their years of study. As a sign of respect and thanks, I'd really like it if all the graduates now could stand, look for your supporters wherever they may be in the room, and doff your cap to say thank you. Thank you. You may be reseated. And now, final moments. For the supporters, this is your final official opportunity to show your graduate how proud you are of them. There's no being embarrassed. We've had quite a good round of applause throughout each of the graduates as they've gone through, but now's a real opportunity to do it collectively. Let's hear the biggest applause and cheering that we can generate in this small group. On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, that woke you all up. What a fantastic energy and a brilliant way to end today's formalities. I want to say thank you again to everyone involved in today's ceremony, both this side of the stage, in the back room, and in the room. Today is truly a day for celebration, and I hope you soak in every moment. As a sign of your new standing within our academic community, I ask the graduates to join the academic procession as we leave the hall. So would everyone please stand?